All right, everybody, welcome to episode three. Episode three. I can't believe three that we've made it this far of the Fantasy Timeline. I'm Josh at the Real Fantasy TL. I'm here with my main man, the host with the most, Bill at Super Duper Flex. Bill, how are you doing?
Doing well. Hoping this game, Monday Night Football, ends up being a little more entertaining than it started out. Looks like the Rams are looking like the Rams.
The Rams are doing Ram things. And Bill, you are doing Bill things right now, beating me in our poll playoff that we have going on. If you guys don't remember last week, we put up a poll. Do you prefer to have your dynasty leagues have a trade deadline right before the playoffs or no trade deadline at all? And Bill dominated with having a deadline before the playoffs, getting 65%. I'm a no trade deadline kind of guy. That only got me 35% of the vote here. So that means Bill is up 2-1, and I actually put in the show sheet so that Bill saw it. No, but Bill was right. Bill has his fingers on the pulse, and he knows what's going on. So, Bill, I tip my hat that I'm actually not wearing this week to you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we will get into some kind of heated debate during the course of this show, and another poll will go up, and we'll see if I can tie this thing up. But crazy week this week. A lot of unusual things happen. We saw Dak Prescott kind of fall and flounder in a bad weather game against a top flight defense. We saw this happen. We saw Mason Rudolph one game after the incident that we all know about with the Browns and Myles Garrett get benched in favor of Pittsburgh's new favorite animal, Duck Devlin Hodges. And he actually threw the ball around a little bit and brought the Pittsburgh Steelers back for a win. So, Bill, my question to you is: you are our quarterback guru here. Devlin Hodges, if you don't already have him on your roster, should we be running out to the waiver wire tomorrow to scoop him up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you're really hard up for a quarterback, and you just need, some sort of filler, like if you're gonna replace him with like somebody, I can't even think. So, if you don't have another quarterback, then you make that move. But that's really the only reason. I mean, if you have a lot of money left in your fab, then I would probably spend it just because there's not many other opportunities. But I mean, I'm not going out, and if there's other players that I'm interested in, I mean, he's not going to be a priority for me.
All right, so I have a question then. If you are let's say, rebuilding team, you do have a little bit of fab left, as you were saying earlier. Is Hodges the type of guy that you throw some fab at, hope he has a couple of Jeff Driscoll type games, and maybe if you're in a league that doesn't have a trade deadline, hope to move him for maybe even a third and just kind of recoup your fab investment that way? Or building team, are you just staying away because odds are he probably won't have those type of games?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a play you could make. That just kind of hold him hostage for somebody else and hope you can score something. I mean, it wouldn't hurt. I mean, just depending on how much fab you have left, if you're, motivated to just kind of play the market and do like what you suggested, I think that's a good play. I don't do that often. It's probably something I should consider doing more. but usually I don't have too much money by this time of the year.
Right.
So like this time of year, if I'm competing, the last thing I want to do is spend money on a player I really don't want.
Exactly.
I mean, but like you say, if you're not competing, then that's something that's definitely probably worth taking a shot on.
And I agree with you, especially in leagues that do have a trade deadline. It's probably this week, maybe next week. And once that comes, the only way to obtain, some kind of an impact player maybe is to get him from the waiver wire. So maybe blowing some fab on a guy like Hodges that probably doesn't have a high probability of getting you a big game or two isn't worth it, and saving that for, maybe the next running back that goes down, if I don't know why, but maybe in Jacksonville, if Fournette goes down and somehow Raquel Armstead isn't, taken, you throw all your fab at him. Or, I mean, it's so funny. You kind of don't realize the running backs that maybe you should be focusing on until a big time injury happens. And then you go, oh, hey, Bo Scarborough is here. Oh, hey, Brian Hill is here. And it's sometimes when you're trying to think of these guys on the fly, you're like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know
Sure.
who the third string running back is in, let's say, Dallas, for instance. If Zeke goes down, it's Tony Pollard, but then who is backing up Tony Pollard? And those are the guys that do that with.
And you can't roster all these people anyway, so it's
right.
You kind of just have to react once the situation presents itself.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of running backs, Frank, I doubt he's listening, but Frank Gore, congratulations. He just moved to third on the all-time rushing list. I mean, I think the guy has been in the league as long as I've been on this earth. And he has just been kind of doing it, maybe not at a high level, but he's reliable. He's dependable. He plays 16 games. And at the running back position in the NFL, that accounts for something. So, again, another, is this a guy that you want on your roster? Maybe you're the Devin Singletary owner and you want to, trade with the Frank Gore owner just to have that backup. Or is he somebody that you have kind of said he's older, he probably doesn't have too many more years, even though I saw a tweet today that said one day we'll be telling our grandkids about Frank Gore. And I responded, one day our grandchildren will be telling their grandchildren about Frank Gore because he'll be playing. So what do you do with Frank Gore? Do you want him on your team? Do you not?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I don't mind having him if I already have Singletary. He is still getting volume, but he's not really getting anything in the passing game, which kind of limits his his effect for your team, But I mean, he's never, if I'm in a playoff team, he's not somebody I hope I'm starting, in the playoffs or something like that. Right. So I'm not going out of my way to add him. If it's something where somebody's offering me, I have a late third and there's somebody who's, out of it and they just want to move him, I'd consider it as if I'm kind of light at running back, but I'd rather get somebody who can catch the ball. It just doesn't look like Gore's really even being used at all in that, instance. So,
and we're all going to be disappointed next year where he leads the Atlanta Falcons or the Houston Texans in rushing because he just seems to be immortal. He doesn't get hurt and he just takes a licking and keeps on ticking. But that, Frank Gore, congrats, number 3 on the all-time rushing list now. So now from the old to the new, Harry season. Harry finally got on the field for the Patriots, caught the only touchdown in that game against the Cowboys. Just a beautiful grab. I don't know if you saw the game, but just a beautiful grab, off of a turnover. And just, I actually tweeted before the game started, they were talking about Philip Dorsett being out and Mohamed Sanu being out, and I responded to that tweet by saying it's Harry season. And it was a messy game, so it's kind of hard to judge his overall play because the elements were, a big part of that game. But what do you think about Harry? What do you what's your outlook on him? Are you, if you're going to buy him, are you trying to sell him? Are you just a hold for right now? What do you think? Because he's someone that I wasn't high on coming into rookie drafts, but now kind of seeing that it looks like they have a spot for him in the New England offense. And obviously that can change. Sanu comes back, Dorsett comes back. Maybe he's fourth fiddle, but it looks like he could carve out a nice little role there in the New England offense.
Yeah, he looks he I think he offers something that any of their other receivers don't, and that's just kind of that he can almost be like a hybrid tight end / wide receiver type player. He's going to be a little more physical. He can box out. He looked great on that back shoulder throw. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's somebody that intrigues me. I mean, he was the top wide receiver for most people entering the draft, and we really haven't seen anything. So the only thing that's really lowered his stock is just the fact that he hasn't played. And there's been so many wide receivers that have shown this year that it's, intriguing to see what Harry can do, being like a half a season behind. So yeah, he's somebody I'd be interested in acquiring for a, I don't know, I'd probably pay mid first for him.
Okay.
Maybe that 107, 108 range. But I don't think any people are selling him, since most of them probably acquired him at 101, 102, 103. Right. And, they've been waiting for him to play. So, odds are nobody's going to be giving that up entering the 2020 draft. So, at least I don't think so. Unless you're like a New England fan. So,
right.
But yeah, I mean, he's somebody that's interesting. I'd probably have to move a player for him because I know I wouldn't be moving a pick that somebody would be interested in.
Right. And I would be very curious to see what happens as the season's over and we start, listening to draft talk and the draft comes and we start doing our rookie drafts. Like you said, right now you'd probably trade the 107, 108. And if he kind of keeps on that path, I'm wondering if during the draft, if you offer the 107 for Harry, is that an auto accept for the Harry owner? Because by that point, the 2020 picks are going to be hyped so much. I mean, we think they're hyped now, and I mean, I don't even think we've seen anything yet. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And, once we see, Joe Burrow is going number one and, does Tua come out and what's going on with Judy and I think the hype is just going to get insane by the time we're actually starting our rookie drafts. And I would love to see somebody with the 107 or 108 try to offer that maybe a week before the draft and see if that's, auto accept for the Harry owner. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with that as we go deeper into the year. And I mean, that could also change if Harry just becomes a touchdown monster for the Patriots the last few weeks of the season. then obviously, it'll probably take a lot more than that to pry him away from any owner. But so we're going from a wide receiver here. We got a quarterback coming up, and you can see the banner here. Is it Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? So, Bill, you brought this up, and I really thought that this was kind of a great question. How far has Aaron Rodgers dropped? We saw the game Sunday night. It was not his best work. I think some of it was him. I think some of it was the amazing 49ers defense. And I think some of it was poor play calling by the head coach. But yeah, he seems to have dropped. And I mean, we listen to a lot of guys in the industry, and some of them are big Aaron Rodgers fans and were before the season started. But I mean, I think you have to say he's fallen, even if it's just for the fact that other quarterbacks have stepped up their game. I mean, two I can think of right away are Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott, who are two guys that probably before the season started, you would not have had rated higher than Rodgers. And I'm sure if we start cycling through, our list of quarterbacks, we're probably coming up with a few more that maybe have passed Aaron Rodgers by. So, I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking he's probably QB7. I mean, and that's kind of off the top of my head. That's not really going through and kind of breaking down. I mean, obviously, Mahomes is one. Still talking about, who do we have at two? Maybe we'll bounce back and forth and see if we can come up with QBs until we get to Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the November ADP for DLF, and so I can just kind of rattle through them, and then you just tell me yes or no.
Okay.
So we have Mahomes at 1, Watson.
Yep.
Lamar.
Yep.
Russell Wilson.
Yep.
Kyler Murray.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm slowly starting to come around on the Kyler Murray bandwagon here.
Dak.
Yep.
Carson Wentz.
No, I probably take Rodgers over Wentz.
Okay. Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I think I would take Ryan.
Baker.
That's tough because I don't know if good Baker is around to stay because we saw a lot of bad Baker at the beginning of the season. So probably not at this point, but I could see myself saying yes by the time the season's over.
Okay, Matt Stafford.
Yes, if this back injury isn't going to become an every year occurrence.
Josh Allen.
No.
Goff.
No.
Okay, so Kirk Cousins.
Oh, that's a tough one. No, but it's close.
Okay, so let's say you're probably in about the 9 or 10 range for Rodgers.
Wow.
So Rodgers is 6 in the November.
Okay.
You're probably getting into like a tier where there's a lot of guys that are pretty similar after like 6 of them. So you get, Mahomes, Watson, Lamar, Russell Wilson, Kyler, Dak. Those are like the 6 for you. Yep. Then you get into like Rodgers, Ryan, Stafford, Cousins.
Yeah.
So those are all kind of blended together.
Right.
So yeah, it's he's kind of dropped in a lot of people's eyes. I mean, I'd rather one of the other guys just because of price, in that tier.
Yes.
So I think he really has dropped in the last couple months. He was only QB5 in the August
Wow.
ADP, so he hasn't dropped much. But I think a lot of that's just name recognition, and I think once somebody makes like a real offer, then you see kind of where people's real opinions are of him, and
what was his ADP?
So overall,
Yeah.
that
Does it have
I
that?
was just looking at the quarterbacks. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. So, I mean, it kind of went from 5 to 6 to maybe 10 now, which is, quite a drop. I mean, even in Superflex, I mean, the 10th quarterback is still probably being taken in the, second round, maybe top of the third at the latest in most Superflex drafts. But I mean, that's quite a drop from probably a first round pick in most likely.
So he dropped in August. He was 81, and now he's 93. So he hasn't dropped too much.
Around pretty much. So, I mean, it's crazy because it seems like LaFleur has come in there and actually he's made this team more balanced. You see a lot of Aaron Jones, a lot of Jamal Williams, and both of those guys are catching passes too. They're not just running the ball. So it's kind of amazing the transformation that we've seen in Green Bay, where we've gone from Aaron Rodgers throwing it to Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson, and to you do see a lot of Aaron Jones and you do see a lot of Jamal Williams throughout the game, and really creating more balance in the offense. So it's crazy to me, but
Yep. Yeah, I've been trying to get out of him. I mean, I've been trying to move Rodgers all season, and there's very few takers. So as much as we look at these ADPs and that's where people think that they ought to go, I mean, he's not selling for those prices.
right.
So it's tough. It's one of those things where he's starting to fall into that Breeze and Brady range from a few years ago, and
Right.
he's just not putting up those prolific numbers as often as he used to, and maybe that's him just still getting used to the offense, and it might be next year that he kind of blows up some, but I think you're never going to be getting the price that you did last year or before for Rodgers. So he's kind of just that diminishing asset that honestly I might sell at a little bit of a discount right now just to get some young guys if I'm not contending, and even if I am, because I just don't feel like there's that great of a variance between him. So if I could move him for like really what's the difference between him and Daniel Jones right now? I hate to say that. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I'm just looking up a normal PPR league right now.
Right.
And if you just look at the last from the last 5 weeks, Daniel Jones is averaging 25 points a game, and let's see where Rodgers is. I can't even find him. He's 17 points a game.
Wow. So 8 points. Wow.
I mean, that's a move that might be worth making. I mean, there's a lot of guys in between. Rodgers is the number 24 quarterback from week 8 to week 12 of this year.
Wow. Okay.
So
wow,
that's concerning. So what can you really get for him? I don't know. I mean, I'm not moving him for like Derek Carr. I'm not moving him I don't think anybody's moving Sam Darnold for him.
no.
I mean, you'd almost have to move him for I mean, is Daniel Jones undervalued right now?
You know what? I think he is, because everyone sees the turnovers, and people get so scared of the -2, or in some leagues the -4 that an interception causes, that it's almost the Jameis Winston argument. You line and you see 3 interceptions and you go, oh crap, he didn't have a good game. But you don't look at the whole box score where he has 315 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And you go, obviously, his line would be a whole lot better without the 3 interceptions. But he still had a pretty damn good game. I mean, I saw some stat, and I can't remember how many weeks in a row it's been, 6 or 7, that Jameis has thrown for 300 yards or more, which is a stat I didn't know, and it's kind of insane. And he could be the first quarterback since the 80s to lead the league in touchdowns and interceptions. So, I mean, the guy, yeah, he throws a lot of picks. That's what Jameis Winston does, but he throws a lot of touchdowns and he throws for a lot of yards. And, you know, Daniel Jones isn't throwing for that yardage yet, but he throws a lot of picks, but he also, you know, accounts for a lot of touchdowns. So, you know, we have to sometimes be wary of just looking at turnovers in determining that someone is a bad fantasy asset and not look at all the other points that they're accruing with yardage and touchdowns.
I mean, he's thrown 8 interceptions, so it's not like he's throwing a million. And
right,
he has 17 touchdowns. He has 235 yards rushing, so he's getting you like 25 yards a game in rushing. Yeah. You know, he's averaging like 250 yards a game passing. So, I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be like a top 5 quarterback, but no. I mean, if you're just trying to buy years and you want to get rid of Rodgers, like I'm looking at the full year now, and Rodgers is averaging about 21 points, and Daniel Jones is averaging like 18.5. So, like, you still might be able to make that move, even though the trend is, you know, in favor of Daniel Jones. Right. I mean, Kirk Cousins is right around the same as Rodgers. That might be a move you can make. I doubt it right now because Cousins is doing so well recently.
Right.
I think Daniel Jones is the guy to kind of target.
Yeah, and it's funny because before you brought up what Rodgers had points per game, I was thinking to myself, I never draft Aaron Rodgers because my draft strategy usually doesn't allow me to get a top 5 quarterback even in a super flex league, which is usually where Rodgers has been drafted, you know, pretty much since he became a household name. And I said, oh, wow, he's around, you know, 10 in ADP or 9 in ADP. And I said, oh, maybe finally, if I do 1 or 2 startups next year, I'll finally get Rodgers. And then we started talking about how Daniel Jones is kind of accounting for more points or similar points per game. And I mean, I don't know ADP, but I'd have to guess he's going 2 rounds later than Aaron Rodgers if I had to guess. And that, you know, that kind of made me step back and think, wow, maybe taking Rodgers at the spot where I would probably get him in a startup next year isn't the best course of action.
Yeah, so he is this is not super flex, but he is 223. Oh, that's August. He's probably, let's see, in the 150s ish.
Yeah.
Oh, Daniel Jones is 177 for November.
177, and we said
93 for Rodgers.
Was 9. So, you know, 80-something picks. Yeah. So, you know, that's crazy, you know, and that maybe I end up with more Daniel Jones next year instead of Aaron Rodgers like I initially thought when we started this thing. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where our reviews of Aaron Rodgers end up at the end of the year. I mean, he still has to play Minnesota one more time. You know, he could catch fire in the next 3 games, and you know, we're totally talking about Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers, and you know, bumping him up a couple more spots. Maybe he's not top 5, but maybe he's right outside 6, 7. And we're talking about him as a, you know, mid to high second round pick next year instead of a, you know, low second, high third round pick in super flex drafts. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on him and see what happens at the end of this year. But now moving on to what we've both individually seen on Twitter, and I'll go first. This is actually a commissioner question. So I saw this question from Interceptopus at FF Interceptopus, and he tweeted, made a big trade that angered the first and second place teams. Commissioner asked me and my trade partner to pay 2020 dues or be kicked out. Not in the rules. He thought the balance and getting complaints. There was no collusion. Is this fair or not? So almost 80% of the poll that was taken said, no, it was a clown move. Bill, I want to get your opinion on this first and see where you lie, and then I'll throw in my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much have to follow what's in the rules. You can't just make rules up unless there's some sort of egregious thing going on. I don't. You can't just start telling people they got to pay for future years. It sounds like they didn't even explain what the trade was or what caused the ruckus. So, I mean, it's hard to make a full decision on what's correct or incorrect. Maybe there was some collusion, who knows, but it says there's none. So I wouldn't, you can't really do anything about that. But I don't know what kind of trade would be necessary to pay for next year unless there was draft picks involved. And if it was draft picks and they just didn't put it, it's a new league, and the commissioner just didn't take that into account and they forgot to address that. I mean, if you're selling draft picks for the next year, I mean, that's just, it's a given that you're supposed to pay for the year when you trade those picks. So, I mean, it's kind of iffy because that could destroy a league if somebody's trading away all their picks and then they just bounce after a year. So that would be the only thing where I think that it is appropriate to make them pay right now, just because that's kind of like a normal thing in dynasty leagues. Other than that, no, I mean, you can't just force people to pay because somebody didn't like a specific trade.
Right. And I totally agree with you. I mean, this is why it's super important. Bill, you commission a few leagues. I commissioned leagues for 15 years, and I haven't done it the last few just because life has made me a whole lot busier, and it's a lot of work to be a commissioner. Anybody who commissions a league should, get your commissioner a case of beer or something. All the guys get together, throw in a few bucks, get him a case of his favorite beer, because it's tough. You have to deal with issues like this. You have people complaining that this trade is not fair. This trade isn't, trying to collect people's money is probably one of the most time-consuming and frustrating things that any commissioner has to deal with. And this is something that every commissioner should do, is have bylaws, have a constitution, whatever you want to call it, a detailed list of rules that cover things like this. If you're a new commissioner and you don't know where to start, jump on Twitter. There's a bunch of guys with bylaws and constitutions that will probably gladly send you their copies. You can obviously alter them. This guy right here, he'll do it. He'll do it. I mean, but it's so important. I'm in the Cartoon Do-Gooders League with Dynasty Outhouse from Trade Addicts, and it's a bunch of seasoned guys in that league, guys that have played Dynasty longer than I have, probably have been around the block, but Russ has a very detailed outline of rules, what happens in pretty much every situation that can come up. And this is one of those things where, as Bill said, it's almost a given that if you're trading future draft picks, you're paying for those years. But in Russ's Constitution, it states that. It says if you trade a future year's draft picks, you have to pay for that year. So it's even written down in that respect so that no one can come back later and say, hey, you traded a future draft pick and you didn't pay. And someone can go, well, it's not in the Constitution. It's there. He can point at the page and say, right here, you have to pay or the trade doesn't go through. And, I think, obviously we don't know what the trade was. We'll go back to our last topic. If it's Aaron Rodgers for Bo Scarborough in a super flex, all right, there might be something going on there. There might be something we want to investigate. But if it's just a trade that people don't like, we said this last week, trades that people don't like on their face sometimes end up going the complete opposite way a year or two or three down the road. Was listening to Trade Addicts last week, and Outhouse said he traded Amari Cooper, he traded for Amari Cooper a few years ago and traded 3 first-round picks. Well, Amari's blowing up this year. You think, 3 firsts for what Amari's been doing? Yeah, maybe you pay that price. And he won the championship last year. So you kind of go, man, he did what he had to do, and it won him a championship. But then he went on to say that those 3 first-round picks ended up being Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, and Joe Mixon. Obviously, no one would make that trade today. Those 3 for Amari Cooper, straight up today. But a few years ago, Amari was inconsistent. Amari wasn't on the Cowboys, but he was a top 5 pick, and it was a move that he felt like he needed to make to win, and it did end up helping him win a championship. So, obviously, in hindsight, those 3 top flight running backs for Amari Cooper would be a trade that everyone would yell at today. But a few years ago, it was a trade that I think most people probably didn't even blink at because of Amari Cooper's upside. So, yeah, I mean, I'm with you 100%, Bill. This is the reason why you need to have bylaws, a constitution, whatever you want to call it. Have your rules written out, have it be detailed. Ask somebody if you don't know where to start. And, do that. I don't think it's fair to ask someone to pay ahead for a trade that people don't like, but yeah, without knowing the trade, it's kind of hard to say. So now we'll move on to something you saw on Twitter, Bill.
Yeah, so I was just tagged in the thank you post from at Superflex dude John Hogue for doing a DLF Superflex mock draft. And if you guys are just looking to get into a mock draft, kind of see where things are going, where players are going right now, or you just need a fix to get a draft in, hit John up. He, usually does 3 to 5 of them a month to get the Superflex ADP. So anyway, give him a note if you want to do that. But the thing I wanted to bring up about it was in the draft, Mahomes went first, Barkley went second, McCaffrey went third, and then Watson went fourth. Number 5 was Lamar Jackson. Is that where you feel he should go? Do you feel that was high, low? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, when I first saw this on the show sheet, I said, wow, this is kind of crazy. I mean, Lamar Jackson at 105, the 4th quarterback off the board. It's kind of crazy. or the third quarterback off the board. Sorry. It's kind of crazy, but if you look at what he's done this year, who else, what other quarterback do you take before him? What other position player do you take before him?
I mean, do you like
young.
Kamara better? Do you like Michael Thomas better? Zeke?
I mean, I'm a big, first round startup. I like getting a running back because there are very few bell cow running backs, guys that are getting 80 to, in Christian McCaffrey's case, 97% of snaps. I mean, there's maybe 5 or 6 of them tops. But I mean, Lamar Jackson is having a Patrick Mahomes type season. It's not 50 touchdowns, but what he's doing on the ground is insane. And I don't know if there's another quarterback that you say, I have to put this quarterback ahead of Lamar Jackson. I mean, I love Dak. I'm a Cowboys fan. You're not putting Dak in front of him. Are you putting Russell Wilson in front of him? I like Russ, but I don't think so. And so then we get into running backs, like you said, Zeke. I think the Cowboys have shown, and even though I totally believe there's going to be a brand new coaching staff in Dallas next year, they're showing that all the new contract has done for Zeke is allow them to dial back on how much they use him, because the passing game has been so great, but they don't want to turn Zeke into Todd Gurley. They don't want him 2 years into his big contract to start complaining about his knees and lose effectiveness. So they're kind of rationing his, plus they have Tony Pollard getting more and more involved as the season goes on. So I don't think you put him in front of Lamar Jackson. Michael Thomas, I mean, I like him. He's proven this year that he's elite. He, maybe the wide receiver one dynasty startup, but I'm kind of from the school that there are a lot of wide receivers throughout a startup draft that you can take and you can go with and be successful. So I wouldn't put him in front of Lamar Jackson in a startup. So who else?
Well, let's go the other way. Do you want Lamar over Deshaun Watson?
Asking the hard questions. Initially, I thought, yes. Stepping back a little bit and putting more thought into it, I still think I want Deshaun Watson as QB2, but I think it's really close, and I think you can make a really good argument for Lamar Jackson at QB2, but I wouldn't do it right now.
Okay, how about over Barkley?
Yes, I would take Lamar Jackson over Barkley in a super flex. It could just be that Barkley has never fully recovered from the high ankle sprain that he had earlier in the season, but he has been very limited in how effective he has been since the high ankle sprain. And I don't know if that is, as I said, due to the high ankle sprain, or is it due to the fact that they're evident now there's no other legitimate offensive weapon that a defense going up against the Giants has to worry about. And they're keying in on stopping Barkley, and they're doing the job. So, yeah, I think right now I would put Lamar ahead of Barkley.
Okay, yeah, I kind of agree. I think he's right in that 104, 105 range. He's just so prolific, and he gets, that rushing is crazy. Like, as of right now, it's halftime on Monday Night Football, and Lamar has 87 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and he has 80 yards rushing. So I mean, it's just stupid. And like, I mean, that's league winnings. That's a league winner. And so like, I can't argue. And he's so young, and it's like him, Mahomes. I get it. Like those two. I like Deshaun Watson too. I probably lean Lamar just because I don't think he's hit his peak. I think Deshaun has he has more tools right now. He doesn't have the line. I think once he gets a line, that's actually going to decrease his statistics because they're going to run probably more. So like I think McCaffrey, he is the ultimate. Like we've already had that conversation, but
of course,
like I think like he is just like he has had 2 bad games in a row, bad quotes, and he's scored like 30 points. So I mean, it's just like he is just head and shoulders above anybody when it comes to like who's gonna this year. The people that win their leagues most are probably going to have McCaffrey on their team. But Lamar's getting there. So like, I mean, you really, if you want one of those elite guys that's going to be a game changer, being in the top 5 is where you need to be for your draft. If you want one of those guys. So yeah, I mean, I guess Lamar is right in that range. I didn't look at like what the average ADP was. That was just in the one draft that I was in. I don't think they've even updated it for November yet, but I just thought I'd bring that up because I thought that was pretty interesting because it's just crazy how far he's jumped up because he was going like in redraft, he was going in like the 11th, 12th, round. And now you probably in a 1 QB, he's going in the 3rd round, I would bet.
Yeah. I mean, I heard a stat, and I may not be 100%, but pretty much before this week's game started, Lamar Jackson was 7th in rushing yards in the league.
Yeah, it's stupid.
7th in rushing yards. I mean, that's not, hey, he can run a little bit. He's a good running quarterback. That's a guy who is literally a guy that if MFL, ESPN, Yahoo, whatever you play on, changed his designation to running back tomorrow, is an RB1 in your league. And that is insane. You're pretty much, anytime you start Lamar Jackson, you're starting a RB1 and an RB1 at the same time. And that is, I mean, like you said, we have talked about it. It's like Christian McCaffrey. When you start Christian McCaffrey, you're starting RB1 and a wide receiver 1 at the same time. I mean, those players don't come around ever. And he's doing it right now. And I know Stompy somewhere is throwing his hands in the air because he was yelling this from the rooftops, before the season started. And I don't even know if he could have predicted this, but
there's no way he could. We've talked. He was, he just saw that there was a great opportunity for this to happen. Like he didn't believe that it was going to happen, but he thought there was a good chance of it. And just the upside was so great because of the rushing. And I mean, and he was right, and so a lot of people just they wanted to look at the negatives, and he just happened to see the ceiling. And that was, that's where he was coming from.
And Baltimore built an offense around what he does well, which you would think in the NFL is something that head coaches and coaching staffs would do all the time, but they don't. They try to fit the players that they have on their rosters into the type of offense or the type of defense that they think is best, that they think is going to win the most games, instead of seeing a guy like Lamar Jackson and saying, hey, you know what? This guy can throw, but he runs really well too. We need to create an offense that allows him to do both. And the entire Baltimore coaching staff or offensive coaching staff did that during the offseason and recreated an offense in order to allow Lamar Jackson to reach his highest point. And, you know, good for them and, you know, good for Lamar Jackson. And if you got him in the 6th round of your super flex startup this year, you know, you have this guy for 10 years and you're going to probably win a championship or two. So the next thing is what we saw, some of the things we saw on the Twitter timeline, and something that caught my eye, the fantasy goofballer at T Goofballer said, I'm a genius for adding a bunch of player A this offseason, but I'm an idiot for adding a bunch of player B. So Goofballer here said he was a genius for adding a bunch of DJ Chark and was an idiot for adding a lot of Dante Pettis. So I'll let you go first, Bill. Who were you a genius for adding a bunch of during the offseason? And who were you an idiot for adding a bunch of during the offseason?
So I had mentioned this previously, but Gardner Minshew in my Superflex leagues was my genius call. I had him in, what do I have, 12 or 13 Superflex, and I had him in like 10 of my leagues. So that was my genius call, and my idiot call was OJ Howard. I just thought the talent was going to outweigh the usage, Arians' usage of tight ends in the last 5 to 8 years.
Yeah.
And something just hasn't clicked between the two of them. And I don't know if it's a work ethic thing. I don't know what, but I don't know if it's an offensive line issue and they need Howard to stay in and block. But wasn't he like a healthy, what's the word I'm looking for? Scratch last week. So
yeah,
like, I don't know what's going on there. And
yeah.
So yeah, that was my, I guess, idiot call because he has not performed the way I expected him to.
Yeah, it's funny. I could have also made my idiot call OJ Howard because during the offseason I was all over Twitter saying that in a Bruce Arians offense he was going to blow up. But my genius call was Dak Prescott. I got him everywhere. The beat writers in Dallas were saying that the new offense was going to look a lot like the LA Rams offense. And while maybe the similarities now, I mean, obviously the offense has improved. Some of that's been Dak Prescott. Some of that has been bringing in a revamped offense. But obviously he's a top 5 QB right now. And my idiot play was Sony Michel. I also spent a lot of time on Twitter arguing about how good Sony Michel was going to be because of kind of his playoff run last year and how dominant he was. And this year, it just hasn't happened. It hasn't accounted the way it did during the postseason. So that's my idiot call. Now, Bill, you saw something. I'll let you run with it.
Yeah. So Scott Fish at ScottFish24 had quote tweeted somebody's comment about how they had. I want to say they were the top scorer in the league, but they were basically the 8th seed based on records. So they were going to miss the playoffs because even though they were the top scorer in the league. So he was just saying that he'd been preaching this for well over a decade now. That your final playoff spot or two should go to top points, guaranteeing the best teams make the playoffs. It's simple. If the top scorer misses, he replaces the 6th seed, or you use the top 5 of record and then the top points remaining for the 6th seed. So that's something I agree with. All of the leagues that I've started, we do if there's divisions, we do the top 2 from each division. So there's records. But then the last 2, so the 2 wild card teams end up being the remaining teams, the top 2 scores of those teams that are left.
Gotcha.
It just, record is so based on luck of matchups. Yeah. There's no skill involved in that. That's kind of my opinion. Right. What are your thoughts?
it's funny because over the years, this is fantasy season number 19 for me. So, I mean, I've been on both sides of this. I've been the highest scoring team that didn't make the playoffs. I've been that 6 seed that has been booted in order to allow the highest scoring team to get in. So honestly, I don't. It doesn't bother me either way. I totally understand why you would want the highest scoring non-playoff team, so to speak, to get in because obviously they proved that they have one of the better teams throughout the course of the season, even if their record doesn't, reflect that. We've seen, it probably happens to everybody once or twice a season. You're the second highest scoring team, but of course that week you went up against the highest scoring team, and it always makes you want to rip your hair out. But yeah, I totally understand where Scott's coming from. I listen to a lot of Scott's stuff, so I know he's been yelling this for as long as I've been listening to him and probably longer. Yeah, as we said earlier, this is what bylaws are all about. If it's in the bylaws, nobody can make the argument that they were the 6th seed and they had the better record, but some other team with more points got in. If you know it going in, I mean, do it. Yeah,
Yep.
That's kind of my feeling on it. So I totally understand why it would make more sense to have that high scoring team get in. So finally, trade targets. Bill, you wrote this in on the show sheet. It was really interesting. Had a lot of fun coming up with my guys. But give me your guys. Let's talk about this a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I just thought we would just kind of add this in. So it's going to go a little bit over our normal hour pod, but just a lot of trade deadlines are coming up, either before week 13 or after week 13. So you either have a couple days or you have a little less than a week and a half to make some moves. So the thing was, do you have any recommended buys for players that won't break the bank? So I kind of looked at it based on how the players have been performing over the last 5 weeks, and kind of saw some guys who are, maybe outperforming their season long, points per game. And
right.
So for quarterback, I mean, I think everybody, every pod, every person on Twitter is touting Tannehill. He's like the number 2 point getter right now for quarterbacks since he's been starting. So I'm going to leave him out. I think if you believe that Stafford, the Lions are going to sit Stafford, Driscoll's actually a sneaky ad for super cheap. Even in a bad game this week, he still got you 16 points. So if you're just looking for in a super flex, like a QB2 with a decent floor, he's actually probably a decent ad that you might be able to get from, let's say, somebody who's not contending for maybe even a third rounder. He might be able to at least give you something if you're, you lost somebody recently. Garoppolo is actually another one. I was surprised when I did this. He is actually, in the last 5 weeks, he is the number 7 QB in points per game.
Wow.
And that includes Stafford, who's not playing anymore. So he's actually the number 6. So, so that's pretty, a lot of people probably don't realize that. And if you're looking at, the season long, he's closer to mid QB2. So that was kind of that's the quarterbacks I was looking at. Running back, if you're looking kind of for a second running back that's got a decent floor, I was surprised at this, that Jamal Williams is actually pretty solid and pretty consistent. And in the one league I was looking at him, he's an RB2, but he's been getting anywhere between 6 and 15 points a game, but most of them are in double digits. So I can't imagine you're paying much more than like a late second for him. So if you're a contender and need a little bit of depth, or spot starter or that sort of thing, he might be worth the ad. Wide receiver, this guy's he's always undervalued and outperforms what his value is, and that's Marvin Jones. Same thing. He's like a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 kind of fringe. But he's only like within 2 points per game of being like a wide receiver 1. Like that's how clumped up everybody is. And he's just a guy that I think always outperforms what you're going to pay for him. And then for tight end, there was a couple. Hollister for Seattle, or actually Jared Cook. If you look at Jared Cook since he's been playing with Breeze again, he's been killing it. And maybe you can get him from a team who's not contending. They had him, and they just want to get rid of an older player. So those are my guys. How about yours?
So it's interesting how the methods that we both use to come up with our players. You kind of were looking at guys that maybe were kind of didn't have the perception of doing as well as they're actually doing. And it's funny, I tried in the Dynasty Trades HQ listener league, which is probably one of my most competitive leagues. I've tried trading for Tannehill and haven't been able to do it. I did trade for Driscoll. Tried trading for Jamal Williams last week before the game started and couldn't get a deal done. And Shane Manila has been trying to trade Jared Cook to anyone who will give him a decent deal. So those are players that I personally have seen in leagues just going around, trade offers being sent out for. But I took a little bit different of an approach to this. I looked at players that have great matchups going into your fantasy playoffs, that maybe could be acquired for cheap. And this one will be kind of funny sounding at first, but I think if I can explain myself, it might make a little bit more sense. At QB, I took Carson Wentz. And I think most people say, well, Carson Wentz is a young quarterback, but if you kind of look at what he's done over the last few weeks, the turnovers have been killing you. And unlike what we talked about with Jameis and Daniel Jones, the touchdowns haven't been there to save him, and the yardage hasn't been there to save him. So he's really been putting up some, crushing weeks for you. And, if you're lucky and you maybe see Carson Wentz is on a team that maybe now has missed the playoffs because of his 4 turnover performance against the Seahawks, maybe this is a guy. He plays the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Redskins his next 3 games. Those are 3+ matchups. And if you can get him maybe at a slight discount because an owner is tired of seeing multiple turnovers, but not seeing multiple touchdowns to match them, maybe you're getting a slight discount on a guy who can really kind of blow up the next 3 weeks. For running back, I went with James White, especially if you're in a PPR. I feel like he might be one of the most underrated players every year. We talk about our guys like Barkley and Kamara and Zeke, but we don't talk about a guy who is normally a low RB1, high RB2 in PPR leagues, because all Tom Brady does is throw him passes and he just, converts them into some yardage. And over the next 4 weeks, he plays the Texans, Chiefs, Bengals, and Bills. And, no elite run defense there. And a couple of those teams are poor against pass catching backs. So he may be a guy that a 2nd-round pick to a guy who's not contending gets the job done, and you get an RB1 or an RB2 for the next 4 weeks. And this could be a guy that you sneak into a flex spot, maybe that helps win you a championship. The next guy picked, that wide receiver, Jamison Crowder. I mean, again, PPR league, Jamison Crowder. He didn't have a ton of targets last week against the Oakland Raiders, but that was kind of a blowout from the beginning, and it was kind of a weird game script, a non-Jets like game script. But he plays the Bengals and the Dolphins in your fantasy playoffs. So again, two teams, poor defenses. The guy is one of the most targeted wide receivers in the league. And he's another guy, again, that you might be able to trade a second round pick for, sneak him into your flex spot, especially if your wide receiver one is Michael Thomas and, or DeAndre Hopkins or something like that. And you have a decent, maybe Marvin Jones is your wide receiver too. You get a guy like Jamison Crowder, sneak him into the flex. And again, those two games during your fantasy playoffs help you win it. And then lastly, I kind of went way down the board here, but at tight end, Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, I didn't realize this until I started looking into this, has at least 6 targets for 4 straight weeks. I mean, the guy's getting targets, and really at the tight end position, unless you have one of the elite guys, you're looking for a guy just to get targets. And then your fantasy playoffs are the Eagles, Jets, Giants, and Bengals. I mean, the Eagles defense has stepped it up, but those other 3 teams, none of those defenses scare you at all. And he could be a guy, again, a second round pick, maybe even a third round pick. If someone is off of the Mike Gesicki train, they've had him for a couple of years. He's never turned into the guy that a lot of people have said he would turn into, that you sneak in at a flex position, or maybe you're in a 2 tight end league and you need another guy, and you have a Kittle or an Ertz, and you're sneaking Mike Gesicki in as your tight end too. And these matchups, sometimes we see it every year, where there's a guy that we did not expect to do what he did and ends up winning you your fantasy playoffs. We can all talk about Damian Williams from coming out of nowhere and burning it up and getting a lot of teams championships, because he was a guy that could have been had for cheap when he became the starter and then ended up blowing up. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I like Gesicki. I think that's a good pick for cheap, because, I mean, and it's not just a play for the playoffs. He's a younger guy that has a fair amount of value potentially going forward. So I like that pick. And James White, for sure. He's that guy, though. You just never know when he's going to hit. So he's very much a high, variance kind of guy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do like, I mean, he's a good pick especially for going in the playoffs when you're looking to win. He's not a guy that I mind in my lineup. So, and actually Wentz is a good one because he's so undervalued right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's somebody that I think I might try to make a move in a league or two. Just try. I have 0 Wentz, so if there was ever a time to buy, it is right now. So yeah. But aside from that, it's playoff season coming up. So good luck in week 13 to everyone. Hope week 12 did well. We're in the home stretch now, and happy Thanksgiving also. So, yeah. But yeah, it's. I'm probably going to be fat. I'm going to be weighing another extra 5 pounds next week when you see me. All that, those mashed potatoes and biscuits and all that stuff. So,
So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. My wife and I argue about this all the time because she does not understand how Christmas is not my favorite holiday. And I said I like to eat. I'm a big guy. I'm to be eating the turkey and the mashed potatoes and the stuffing and the macaroni and cheese and bread. Sometimes there's appetizers. Sometimes there are, other goodies. Maybe somebody's making ham. There's usually dessert afterward. Pumpkin pie type guy. Maybe. Go ahead.
I have
Go
a
ahead.
question for you because this is something I saw on Twitter where they were talking. I don't know if you saw that going on the rounds, like what your most controversial food take is.
Yes.
And I forget who it was. I think Pat Thorman was saying to put sharp cheddar on your apple pie and heat it up.
Huh.
And I'm like,
Interesting.
is this real? Like, is that a real thing? And sure as the sun shines, I looked it up and it is a real thing. Like it's a more of an East Coast thing. I'm not, I'm a Midwest guy, but yeah, it's I guess common in New England. So I'd never heard of it in my life. So
interesting. I'm an East Coast guy.
Vermont or something is where I.
Yeah,
So,
that sounds like that area, the weird part of the Northeast that
okay.
us people from the New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York area do not associate with, because until you had said it, I had never heard of that. It sounds disgusting.
It does, but I'm gonna give it a go.
You're a better man than me. I don't think I'm that adventurous, but yeah, it's going to be a good time. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hope the holiday is fun. Whether you love it or not so much, maybe you have that weird uncle that likes to argue politics at the table. At least it's a day off of work, if nothing else. So, we all hope you guys enjoy it. Bill, it has been a pleasure. Episode 3, it is in the books. We hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you guys weren't able to jump onto the live stream, remember, we are everywhere. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify, we're on Podbean, we're on Google Play. If I missed something, you can probably find us in all the other places I just listed. Subscribe, download, leave a rate and review if you can. We really appreciate it. We have a ton of fun doing this. Again, I'm Josh at The Real Fantasy TL. Send me a tweet. I will answer your questions. Bill at Supa Dupa Flex. He will answer your questions. He's a lot smarter than me. And obviously, hit us up on the show Twitter page at Fantasy Timeline. We're both on there all the time. We answer questions there as well. And like we always say, when you guys send us tweets, they might end up here, might be ending up something that we talk about. So again, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And we are out.
Late.